are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the country. This is Stacy Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the Farmers Market Coalition, and I just want to welcome everyone to Winning Grants with Logic Models, Improve Project Management and Evaluate Success. This is a FMC member webinar, and we're proud to bring this to you. And thank you to all FMC members that registered and to whom are making this webinar possible with their support. So hopefully everyone can see my first slide here. Whether you're preparing a grant proposal, as many of us are in these coming weeks, or you're getting ready for a big project, logic models are an effective and sometimes necessary required tool for understanding or projecting the effectiveness of a program and the relationship between its goals and its final measured impacts over time. They can be very simple, they can be complex, but being able to use them is a critical skill for any organization seeking support through the Farmers Market Promotion Program and a variety of other USDA and private grant programs. So we hope today's session is going to allow you to begin with the end in mind and connect your project activities with outputs and outcomes. And we will be sharing a few resources for further information and reading for you, as well as a logic model template in Word format that you can use. And I'm going to just make a couple housekeeping notes. We are going to have a little bit of time for questions. We've reserved quite a bit. We've reserved 90 minutes for this session. And we hope that it will give those of you who are seeking or have questions about the Farmers Market Promotion Program an opportunity to ask questions of our presenter, Carmen Humphrey, or about logic models in particular. So Carmen is going to cover a little bit about the Fmpp program, and you should have ample opportunities to ask any questions in particular about that. So in order to type in a question, you can go ahead and do that in the questions window there. It should be on your right-hand side panel, and we'll get to those after Carmen's presentation. And I'll go through those questions and make sure that Carmen is aware of all those questions so that she can respond to them. So it's no surprise to anyone anymore that the number of farmers markets has grown exponentially, more than 150% in the last 10 years. And as we know, USDA has recently reported a few months ago that the number of markets open in winter months is increasing dramatically as well. And estimates based on our own FMC membership data indicate that there are at least 50,000 farmers selling at farmers markets nationwide, serving millions of families and individuals from all backgrounds. But we know that these numbers alone are not an indicator of success, that we can give ourselves a high five at the end of the day and say, we've grown a number, that's that, and move on. But there are a wealth of impacts that need evaluating, that need indicators assigned to them so that we better understand them. And so in that spirit, we're really proud to bring you this logic model webinar that's going to talk about the importance of evaluation and then specific strategies to help you with it. So many of us right-brained thinkers often see something more like this when we look at a prospective project or a proposal, which can seem intimidating. Where do we start? What's the priority? What do I focus on first in my proposal? There are a lot of questions that we encounter, and sometimes things can seem half-baked as we mold a proposal or a project concept until we pull together all the partners, any matching funds, we get the budget written, we understand how we're going to evaluate whether we've been successful or not, we secure all of the letters of support, and all those kinds of activities that we need to do. In order to be competitive and accountable to funders, community partners, and of course the farmers and the customers that we're aiming to serve, we need to be able to bring order to this process. And it's not enough to simply assume that because we're busy every day that that's the same thing as making an impact. So today we're going to talk about how logic models can help bring order to what can sometimes seem an intimidating process. Logic models were something that began being used in the 70s, and they're not necessarily just an evaluation tool, but in many ways a project development tool or project design or planning tool that, again, allows you to develop a roadmap at the beginning and see your goals and evaluation as part of a process. And not evaluation is not something that you do when you are at the last 3 days before your final project report is due, and you're forced with somehow being accountable in that final report. Evaluation needs to be designed from the beginning as part of the process. So some logic models can also be referred to as theories of change, models of change, conceptual maps, outcome maps, and they help connect what we assume to be an outcome of our activities with the actual indicators for those. And often, starting with faulty assumptions when we're developing a proposal can lead to poor results. If you're assuming something about the community or assuming something about the stakeholders that are going to be involved in the project, and those assumptions are not actually correct, then that can kind of lead the project astray. And sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it certainly helps to have doing our due diligence in making sure our assumptions are as valid as possible when we're beginning. So why bother? There are many reasons, obviously. If you don't know what steps you took, or if you do know what steps you took, but you don't know exactly where you ended up after the course of all those steps, what good is that? And if you know what you accomplished, but you don't really have a clue what steps you took to reach that goal, how is it going to be useful to other people who may want to learn from your success or may want to learn from your lessons learned, your stumbling blocks? So logic models are one way to enhance teamwork, to help motivate and give guidance to staff. It's not always the person who writes the grant that's going to be the one administering it, so helping provide direction is really valuable. It helps to identify the important variables that you're going to measure and to use your resources wisely. And it can help increase the credibility of your organization and expand your ability to garner additional or matching resources, maybe from other funding sources. So this is a general concept. Many of you hopefully have seen something like this in the past. This is an evaluation logic model, and the University of Wisconsin Extension has done a great deal of work in trying to help expand the concept of logic models and help people develop them, acknowledging that many grant programs require them. So resources like this are available through the University of Wisconsin Extension program, and we link to them later in a resource slide. So underlying this logic model is a series of if-then relationships that express your theory of change as a program, what you think your activities will ultimately yield. So just to make sure this doesn't seem too intimidating, and to illustrate that they don't need to be intimidating, I think it's helpful to point out that we actually do this in our heads quite frequently in a more casual context. So this is a very overly simplified example of what a layman's logic model might look like, in this case for a family vacation. This is a mental process of if-then steps showing some connections and logical linkages that lead to an ultimate goal. So the inputs are the resources that go into this effort. The outputs are the activities, the products, the participation generated through the investment of resources. And then the outcomes are changes in knowledge, awareness, skills, attitudes, opinions, motivations, behaviors, decision-making, or even a change in policies. What's missing here, of course, are the actual indicators that would allow us to know that the family members have learned about each other, that they have bonded, that they've had a good time. So maybe in this case, indicators might be a number of stories that are told, that if there was a laugh-o-meter where you could measure the number of times that families or the family members laughed, that might be an indicator, as silly as that seems. The number of times maybe over the next 3 years as a longer-term impact that members of the family referenced. Remember that time we went to the state park? Wasn't that great? So as silly as this is, I bring it up just because it is one example of a very simplified way that that these have some relevance in our everyday lives. We want to bond. We think back what needs to happen in order to make that bonding experience happen. So let's bring this back to a farmer's market context, and we're talking about how we measure success with respect to farmers markets or local food projects. And FMC is working on a series of indicators that we've identified that markets are already using, or ones in some cases that they could be using, to evaluate either economic, human, social, or natural capital in some way. And other organizations like Market Umbrella have been doing this for years, have developed some indicators. And there are a number of grassroots or state-level efforts to evaluate that we're also bringing into this project, so that we have this matrix of indicators that we think will ultimately be helpful for anyone, whether they're applying for something like an Fmpp or simply want to do due diligence to the work that they're doing and measure their impact and be able to effectively communicate that to their communities. In this example, or in this image, we see that this sign of eggs being sold out could be interpreted as a measurement of success if farmers are selling out. Perhaps, depending on your goals, that could be an indicator of success if you were seeing that farmers were selling out. Now, that indicator alone may not mean much, but in the context of others, it may be an indicator that that demand is increasing, or an indicator that maybe you need to seek some additional egg vendors, whatever that might mean. So here are just a few examples, and Carmen is going to go much more in depth about the distinction between outputs and outcomes. And I think it's really important that we distinguish between outputs and outcomes, because oftentimes we can easily confuse them. An output is generally the activity, the publication, the event, and the number of people who participated in it. That's different than an outcome, which is the impact of that output. So as a result of 39 people participating in the cooking demonstration on April 17th, 80% of them indicated 5 months later that they had still had increased levels of vegetable consumption, or whatever that might be. But the outcome is really the difference that you're trying to make. You're not just hosting cooking demonstrations for the sheer sake of hosting cooking demonstrations, for example. So because Carmen has some great things ahead for you, I don't want to dally too much longer, but before I introduce her, I just wanted to mention that if we're accountable not only to our funders, but the people who wake up early to be part of the market, to our community's expectations of integrity, to the expectations of the farmers, of ourselves, and to our future customers that we haven't met yet, perhaps, then we are responsible for being able to understand what success looks like and be able to see how well we're meeting our missions, regardless of how we're funded. So I'm going to introduce Carmen Humphrey. Carmen is the branch chief and program manager of the Farmers Market Promotion Program, otherwise fondly known as the Fmpp, which is a grant program administered through the Marketing Services Division of the Agricultural Marketing Service at USDA. And Carmen, I've got to give you credit if you can sit down on a business card. Oh. And before Carmen gets started, we're gonna do a quick poll here to assess how many of you are intending to apply for the Farmers Market Promotion Program this year. And then once we respond to that, that will hopefully give us some indication of, to help Carmen with her presentation so she knows how many of you are actually prospective applicants. And Liz, I'm still sharing my screen, so I may, I don't know if I need to close that. Okay. So we'll give one more second to that. Hopefully this is a question that doesn't require too much thought here. Okay, 55% of you said yes, 8% said no, 38% said not sure, and maybe those of you on the fence are waiting until the end of this webinar to decide if it's right for you. So no pressure, Carmen.
None taken. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Farmers Market Coalition, for inviting me to join you all today to share with you the information that I think is sometimes very confusing to a lot of people. But as Stacy mentioned, we're going to try to make this as simple as possible. So if Stacy, if you or Liz could let me know whether or not I'm up and running, then I'll go ahead and I'll get started.
I don't see you yet. I saw you flash for a second. Do you have another little request to share your screen?
Let's see. There we go. Got it. Thank you. Am I up now?
Yep.
Okay. Can you see the entire screen?
Yeah, we can see your whole first slide there.
Okay, great. Okay, I didn't know if you could see the other GoToWebinar stuff. All right. So again, my name is Carmen Humphrey, and we're going to talk about understanding logic models today. So what I plan to do is to just give you some background information first about the Farmers Market Promotion Program, and then from that point, we will move into logic models once I get this to work here. Okay. So the Farmers Market Promotion Program, as you may be aware, is a competitive grant program, and our entire existence is to assist in establishing and expanding and promoting farmers markets and other direct-to-consumer marketing programs. Our primary objective is to help to improve and expand farmers markets, roadside stands, community-supported agricultural programs, agritourism activities, and again, other direct producer-to-consumer marketing activities. I put the website down at the bottom of this screen so that if you want to take a look at the type projects that we have awarded, you can go to this website as well as to find any 2012 application information. We're authorized under the Farmer to Consumer Marketing Act of 1976, and this year we are happy that we have $10 million or approximately $10 million available for funding. 10% of the total funding goes toward new EBT projects at farmers markets. We also fund existing EBT projects as well at farmers markets and in other additional avenues. There is no matching required, and our minimum grant amount is $5,000, and we award up to $100,000 per awardee. Projects can last up to 24 months. So with that in mind, why is this emphasis, particularly this year, in logic models? Well, as Stacy mentioned, some of the reasons for logic models have been already explained by her, but the logic model for us as a grantor explains the actions that you as the applicant or the awardee will take in implementing your project, and it explains how you're going to plan or how you're going to measure the success of those actions or those activities. It also explains your anticipated results. Your implementation results are needed by the agency so that to determine whether or not they're part of our mission and a part of our needs, and we want to share that with other stakeholders, states, communities across the country. And just so you understand, logic models are not necessarily static. They can be changed. An awardee may request that you add or delete outcomes or outputs, or change them minorly to fit the needs of the agency. Additionally, the reason for the importance of logic models is because it's part of the evaluation criteria and our scoring mechanism. The elements that are listed on the screen now are the criteria in which your application will be scored. So the reviewers, your peer reviewers, will use this criteria, and based on your application, the information that you've provided within the narrative, they will score your proposal, and those recommendations are forwarded to us. If you'll note, different from last year, the Fmpp priority activities are additional 5 points beyond the normal 100 points. So that's just a change from 2011, information about a change from 2011 to 2012 this year. So again, quantitative evaluation and performance measurement, which is the criteria from which you'll be scored, what does it involve? So it involves the evaluation and how you will measure your results, establishing a baseline information, what's happening now, mapping your project, what steps you plan to take, the actual logic model itself, which includes resources, all the way to performance measures, and also reporting performance. So I'm going to go over just about all of those today to explain the logic model. Evaluation. So in evaluating your project, it should include your systematic collection of information and to determine how successful or unsuccessful your project was. How are you going to collect that information? Are you going to do that by research or survey, questionnaire, interviews? What changes are you anticipating as a result of your project activities? It's also the analysis of that information. Did your efforts actually make a difference? And that includes what changes have occurred as a result of this effort. Baseline information is information that you provide both the reviewers and the agency, and an explanation about the understanding of what is currently happening. This is what we like to call the before information. Before you actually started implementing your project activities, this was the baseline. This was where the actual program or system that you're going to be attempting to change actually is drawn from. It also includes what behaviors need to be changed or added or revised from previous activities. And so these are the gaps that need to be filled. So from that, you want to map your project. And what we mean by mapping is what steps you plan to take to implement your project. The map shows the activities that you plan to take, those activities being the outputs, and the results you anticipate, or the outcomes. And this map is illustrated in what we call a logic model. And basically the logic model incorporates your organization's steps or your planned course of action to receive your desired results, which therefore helps you meet your goals and objectives that you've outlined in your application. So again, the logic model is a summary of the implementation plan for your project, all on one page, and it includes the information that Stacy provided earlier: inputs, activities, outputs, but we also include costs, outcomes, and performance measures. And these are the list of indicators that are used to gauge your project. So what is an input? An input is a summary of the people or the resources that you may have available or you'll be using, or things that are needed during your project implementation. These include the people, the equipment or supplies, and other things such as meeting space or the city's use of land or the county's use of facilities that you may have access to. It also includes in-kind and matching contributions that you may have available. So any input is just what you bring to the table either before you start or what you will need during the course of your implementation. Activities. Activities are each step of your project. So I've given you some examples here. One might include advertising to promote a farmer's market. And this is the example that I'm going to use throughout the rest of the afternoon. Another might be training for farmers. Another may be increased participation at a market or at a CSA, in a CSA, etc. So this just gives you an idea of what activities are. It's sort of the broad overview of what the steps are. Outputs are a summary of the implementation plan. So this includes the activities, services, or events. This might include your providing workshops, counseling, a little more detail than what we described before. These may be to change behavior, increase knowledge, or increase financial or personal improvement. Costs. Okay, this explains and should be linked to the budget in which you're requesting from the grantor. So this is a summary of each of the costs involved in each activity. So one cost may be a 30-second radio advertisement. Let's say you want to do 15 of those, and that may cost $375. It gives the peer reviewer as well as the agency an idea of what that entire activity is going to cost under your proposed budget. Outcomes. Outcomes provide a summary of what results or what changes you anticipate happening to your beneficiaries or systems as a result of the project. These may be short-term benefits, could be long-term benefits, could be medium-term benefits. Short meaning changes in awareness, knowledge, skills, opinions. Medium being changes in behavior or decision-making. Long-term may be social or environmental changes, either throughout the county or throughout the state. So outcomes may be intended and they may also be unintended, but either way, they each should be recorded and reported. Performance measures. Performance measures provide a summary of indicators that answer the question whether the project is achieving or has achieved its objectives. They could be quantitative, such as numeric information, such as how many farmers are available to be trained, or how many radio advertisements are being implemented, Qualitative changes are less about numbers but are more about changes in attitudes, behaviors, and awareness. Okay, so taking our example as we previously discussed, advertising to promote a farmer's market, one quantitative measure might be consumer counts. How many consumers were counted at the market before the radio advertisements or the advertisements or promotional advertisements, and how many after, at the end of the market season or after first or second radio advertisement was done. Another is the percent change in the number of customers from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Or it could be percent in average sales per customers. Qualitative, again, is less about numbers, but might be a survey about how customers learned about your market. So these are just some examples that we thought that you may be helpful when you're beginning to work on your logic model. Now, as the project progresses, performance measures, of course, through interviews and surveys, that needs to be identified up front. They take into account, in terms of the measurement of your progress, the evaluation findings, baseline information, and external factors. We explained or discussed a little bit about baseline information, but external factors may be something that may not be part of the project in which you are actually implementing, but may affect your project. For example, if by chance, if you're advertising at a radio station and the radio station closes, that's an external factor that you had no control over, but would affect your advertising plan. So you may have to change radio stations. You may have to do something completely different. But those type of factors need to be researched and also provided during the implementation of your project plan and reported to the grantor, which may cause an adjustment for your logic model or for your plan. So instead of thinking that a logic model is something you just have to create, after the end of your completing your goals and objectives and trying to determine your results, instead think of the logic model as a means of creating or illustrating your desired results. And therefore, by doing those activities or those actions, you will be able to complete your goals and objectives. So we just ask that you start thinking of them maybe as not as a chore, but as a part of a normal project development. So here's an example of the advertising campaign that we're going to start. So our activity, as you see, activity B under activities column, is just one of, say, 2 or 3 activities under an Fmpp request. So activity B, conduct advertising to promote the farmers market in 3 low-income neighborhoods. So as a part of those things that we're going to do, or those outputs, are print advertisement, public service announcements, and we're going to purchase a new sign. And from that, we're going to determine performance measures, how we're going to measure that. So we would check weekly. We would be providing weekly advertisements and be checking back at our market to see what happens maybe later with our customer counts. We're going to do 30-second radio advertisements on every Friday morning, and we're going to install a new sign. And here you put some dates and things like that. But then you'd also associate those with the cost of those items. Advertisements, the print advertisements may cost $2,000. Personnel time to prepare the public service announcements, ads, maybe $375, and to purchase a sign would be $1,500. So this should follow what is going to be provided in your budget, your total budget. Those 3 items should be there. Outcomes are successfully to draw new customers to the market, increase loyalty and regular attendance, and increase consumption of local agricultural products. And then if the measure would be the number of customer accounts, the percent change in customers, also customer surveys and how customers learned about the market, and maybe another customer service to learn how much customers spent and whether they will return later. So note that what is not here are the inputs, the baseline information. That can be done on a separate page. But this page is the one-page or the two-page logic model example that can be provided for an Fmpp grant. And this does not count against the 12-page limit. Here's another example. This is a pretty one. I like the colors in this example. We sort of took this from an applicant and asked if we could use this. They were planning to do a public, the public health division of a state public health department was going to implement a mobile farmers market, and this was what they generated for us to explain their activities. They explain their resources, which we would also call input, staff time, promotional materials, etc. The engagement and the activities explained who was going to be engaged in what activities that were planned, these activities that are listed here. The outcomes, they anticipated 3, and how they were going to evaluate. The part of their evaluation includes the calculations for measurements. I'm not going to go over all of this because you all will have access to this at your leisure, but just understand that they were very serious about how that they were going to measure, how they were going to show what their goals were, what the baseline currently was, and where they anticipated things, where they anticipated how changes would be made throughout that project. So now, in this last example, did you see anything missing? And I'm going to answer the question for you, but was there anything that should have been included, and was there anything that may have been asked for in if they were applying under Fmpp, under the Fmpp application? So let's go, oops, excuse me, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so here the thing that's missing is the cost of these activities. That's one thing that's missing. Another thing that potentially could have been included here is the dates in which they were going to implement these activities. There's no time relationship with regard to that. And that's okay, but it would be nice to have everything in one succinct location as well. And speaking of time, let me just give you something that actually the Farmers Market Coalition developed for us to include in this PowerPoint presentation, a timeline. We thought it would be good for you to have, as well as a logic model example, a timeline example. And you'll note here, these are the action steps or activities that are being proposed. There are 3 activities: creating a marketing partnership, conducting advertisements, and developing sponsorship program. So here is where you'd put those activities, what the 3 or 4 activities involved with each of those action steps or activities might be, and a timeline for when things are going to be implemented. We thought this was a good example to just provide for you. And again, we'd like to thank Stacy and the Farmers Market Coalition for developing this for you to show what a simple timeline might look like. So I think, Stacy, if you could jump on, I think you said we have about 50 people who said that they anticipated applying under Fmpp. Was that correct? Or 50% of the people on the line, is that correct? Or maybe she's not there right now.
No, Carmen, I had muted myself.
Oh, okay.
It took me a second to unmute myself.
That's okay.
I think it was about 50% of the people
Okay.
who were responding, and we now have 53 folks other than the three of us who are participating. So it was
okay. Well, that's good to know, because I've saved the sort of the last three things, or last 3 or 4 slides, for those folks that we know are going to be applying. And then for those of you who have not made up your mind, maybe this will help you in some shape, form, or fashion. We want to point out a couple of things if you are applying under Fmpp that may be different from 2011. So I want to point those things out to you. The first and most important thing, before you even start your application, please, 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 please print the Fmpp guidelines, read that document, and follow the instructions about how to prepare your application. The second is everything must be submitted via Grants.gov. We are not accepting anything by email or by mail this year, which is different from previous years. And you must have everything in that one grant application. So if you're submitting something in Grants.gov and you forget something, then you have to resubmit the entire application again. So please, again, make sure you use our checklist in the Fmpp guidelines to ensure you have everything, so that you won't be missing any documents and have to receive a letter from us indicating that we were not able to accept your application. The second thing that's, the next thing that's important is that we do have an Fmpp priority this year, and that is increasing healthy food access in food deserts and low-income communities. And I'm not going to read this to you, but those projects are to develop healthy food direct outlets in food deserts and in low-income communities. So please take a look at that information. I can tell you it's on page 9 of the guidelines. It's scary that I know the page number where all of this stuff is. But it's on pages 8, 9, and 10 of the guidelines that can help you if you check the food desert track to see if you're in a food implementing your project in a food desert area. That will allow you to receive an additional 5 points on top of the points you have already being measured for. Additionally, in Grants.gov, there are basically 3 forms only that you complete. With that being said, all the additional documentation and all the other required information for your application, as well as letters of support and things like that, must be submitted as an attachment. So again, there's only 3 forms that you create or have to generate in Grants.gov. They are the SF424, 424A, and 424B. Those documents are all there, and the additional documents that must be added to your application that are also required must be uploaded as an attachment. So we've put a lot of information about this in our guidelines, and what I'm going to just list for you here are what those attachments are that are uploaded under the SF424. And they are the written proof of eligibility, which proves you are one of the organizations, agricultural cooperative, producer network, producer association, local government, nonprofit corporation, public benefit corporation, economic development corporation, regional farmers market authority, or tribal government. Those are the eligible entities, and so your written proof of eligibility from a state or federal source must be copied, scanned, and uploaded as an attachment. The second thing is the written proof of contractor sub-awardee debarment status. Okay, so what is that? That means you need to go to epls.gov for anyone who is a contractor or a sub-awardee, someone else receiving money other than the personnel that's listed from your organization to prove that they are not debarred. So I've provided you the website to that debarment status, epls.gov. You just type in the contractor's tax ID number or the EIN number, print off the screen that says that they are not debarred, and include that as a part of the application package. The next thing is that sub-awardees as well as contractors must all be registered with CCR and must have a DUNS number. And this is only for those individuals that are receiving $25,000 or more in Fmpp grant funds. So if you have anyone that is supposed to receive more than $25,000, you need to make sure that they have provided you their printed CCR registration. And that that website is ccr.gov. So I'll add that to this PowerPoint slide, and it will be available for you after this webinar is over. The proof of qualifying status for project priority project designation is information that you will need to provide that your project is being implemented in a food desert community. So you would be going to the ERS Food Desert Locator, and you'd put in the implementation address, city, state, zip, and the county, and either the FIPS code or the poverty rate. And all of that, again, is on page 9 of the Fmpp guidelines. Well, 8 through 9 and page 17 as well in the Fmpp guidelines. The fifth thing is, of course, you need your narrative, and the sixth is you need your budget, whether it's a non-EBT budget or a EBT budget, depending on which one you're applying for. And then you also need supporting documents if you have any. Those would be letters of support or letters of any other letters that you'd be sending along with your application. So with that being said, and hopefully we'll still have enough time. Yeah, we do. I have provided just a point of contact for the Fmpp grant team. It's got I've listed our phone number as well as any questions. If you have any questions, we have a special place for you to submit questions, and that will close shortly after the application process closes, which is May 21st, 2012. And so that email address will be available to everyone until shortly after May 21st of this year. Something else I wanted to share with you is just the couple of things from our website. Let me show you this one first. This is just a screenshot of our website to show you where the NOFA, the invitation that was in the Federal Register, the press release, information about registering with Grants.gov and all the documents that you will need. It's important to note here that you must be registered with the Central Contractor Registry, CCR, or CCR.gov, through CCR.gov, and you must also have your tax ID, your DUNS number, and what else am I forgetting? Oh, you must also have all of that completed before you can register with Grants.gov. So just the CCR registration takes about 2 weeks before it becomes active. So you need to do that today. Your organization needs to register through CCR.gov today. Register there so that if you have not registered with Grants.gov, you can do that. But it does take a little while before that happens. So we've tried to put that in both on the website as well as in our guidelines to make you aware of that if you've never registered with Grants.gov. Additionally, this is just to show where the links are to the documents that we have made available to you, the guidelines, eligible grant fund uses. This document here, performance measurement and evaluation, this is a document that sort of is a summary of everything that I've tried to go over with you today about what outputs and outcomes are, examples of logic models, things of that nature. So you'll have a couple of tools to take home with you. You can just print these and use them at your convenience. But that's what I had. Stacy, did I forget anything, or do I need to cover anything else you can think of?
I think that was pretty comprehensive. We have had some great questions coming in, so
okay.
I'd like to make sure that we have a little bit of time for that.
Okay.
So maybe now would be a good opportunity. I can bring up while we're still talking about logic models per se, before we get into some of the general Fmpp questions.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
We can bring up the Word document that we have here. Let's see here. We did have a question from a couple folks about whether any of these templates, for example, the project timeline one that you showed, Carmen, would be available in Word format. And the answer is yes, we will make that available on the Information Marketplace webpage. In addition to this, this one, which is what we created yesterday. This is some designed to assist Fmpp applicants in particular that FMC developed, and Carmen reviewed it and has seen it, and there's a chance that there may ultimately be another Word version available on the USDA website where Carmen had showed you those other links. And for now, this will be available on the FMC website in this form. One of the things I wanted to highlight, and I think really illustrates this question of the difference between an output and an outcome, and this is a quote from the United Way of America, saying that outcomes are not how many worms the bird feeds its young, but how well the fledgling flies. So that might be a good reminder for some of us, in this process where things seem kind of intertwined and it's hard to tease out the distinction between our activities and the ultimate outcomes that we're actually hoping for, that are a little bigger picture in nature. So this would illustrate, as Carmen mentioned, the inputs, the activities, the outputs associated with those activities, and then the cost. And I think as Carmen referenced, they are in particular trying to look for, to the best degree possible, an allocation of costs relative to certain activities, so that to the best of your ability you should be able to break out that each activity that you're engaging in is going to require this much in sort of, printing and publication or staff resources or what have you. And then at the bottom here you'll see how this is where the assumptions that you have about why or how your proposed strategy will be effective, and then those external factors, for example, you're projecting, you're just thinking out loud of all of the things that could happen that could positively or negatively influence your ability to undergo the activities that you've proposed. So this will be available. It is available now on our website, and I'm going to bring back up the. Sorry for all of that. Those of you who are trying to follow along here. These are a series of links that we have that I think are really useful, and these will be available also on the Information Marketplace page. In addition to the evaluation measurement guide that Carmen showed, I'll go ahead and show this here. In addition to the evaluation guide that Carmen referenced, there's a really fantastic logic model development guide that the Kellogg Foundation developed. It's a little bit lengthier and probably a little more conceptual in nature. But for those of you who find this topic really interesting and are interested a little bit more in kind of the theory of change and all of that, it may be good background reading if you're interested in kind of learning more a little bit about program evaluation, as the Kellogg Foundation sees it. And then there are some other templates that have been developed by other, typically land-grant institutions, the University of Wisconsin, which I mentioned, and as well the University of Missouri, which developed a few different templates. And the Word document that I just referenced is this one here that's available at this link, that sample logic model. Now with that, I'm going to go back to bringing in some questions that many of you asked, and we'll just start from the beginning, if that's okay, in terms of when people ask the question. The first one is from Kathy, and she asks, how can we get our score from last year's proposal? We didn't get funding, and we don't know how well we scored.
Okay, and I'm assuming she's talking about Fmpp, so that's easy.
Yeah.
What I would ask for you to do is to email me or Ricardo at as long you want this before, of course, it's the application process closes. So if you use the email address that I gave, USDA Fmpp questions, all one word, USDA Fmpp questions at ams.usda.gov, and ask Ricardo to please provide you the reviewer feedback. I would love to say that I do everything around here, but I don't. I have a wonderful team that takes care of a lot of things for me, and Ricardo can take care of that for me as well.
Okay, and along those lines, Eileen has a question about whether it's possible to get more specific information about the past awards. For example, when it says enhance EBT, does that mean advertising, cooking demonstrations, improved equipment, staffing the information booth, or other kinds of activities? So how can a current applicant better understand what others have done to quote-unquote enhance EBT?
Okay, a couple of ways. We can give you some feedback, but if you want to just call us and ask us to go into a little more detail. But if you want to talk to the actual awardee, I can send them an email and ask that they contact you to discuss what they're currently doing or what they did in the past. So either way, you can call or email us, and one of us can provide you the information or get you in contact with the actual awardee who implemented the project, which honestly I think is better than just asking us, because we can just tell you what we read. But from their application, actually contacting the awardee who actually implemented the project makes a whole lot more sense to me than just hearing what they provided in the narrative.
And Eileen, AMS has been kind enough to provide us with the information on past awardees, which we've sort of aggregated into a spreadsheet for our own internal ability to be able to kind of see what some of the Fmpp applicants have done and be able to search for keywords. So we may, in addition, if you have a particular kind of keyword that you're looking for, we may be able to search through that as well. So hopefully between Carmen's shop and FMC, if there's a specific, for any of you, if there's a specific concept you're looking to see if there's been a past proposal on, we may be able to help you insofar as it appears in their project, in their proposed project description or their project title, maybe a little more efficiently than if you're trying to go scan through all of the PDFs yourself. So keep that in mind as well. So the next question is from Colleen, who asks, and this is a little more logic model specific, what happens if I set an outcome with goals to measure and the results simply don't come? For example, if I say I'm going to increase the number of farm vendors using Facebook and Twitter to talk to their customers, and they just don't do it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I assume Fmpp has some kind of analysis for where and why results didn't deliver. So how could Colleen anticipate that or report on that?
Well, and I think she actually kind of answered part of the question. If was it she that said that things just didn't work out, and for example, through Twitter or whatnot, just simply reporting as a part of your performance reports that this is what you tried, how often you tried, and no one responded. That's good enough. We're not going to not believe you. So if you only had one person that responded back, just report that. Things don't always go as are planned. So and it happens. That's why you kind of learn from your mistakes. So you have to maybe take a new set of actions to either help that cause or maybe go down a different path. So either way, it's just important to be truthful about what happens, because when you make something up, then it usually gets you in trouble later. So it's best just to be truthful about what happened, and then call us and discuss with us. Maybe we have some ideas, or you may have some ideas about a different direction to take.
Would that be an opportunity for is there an opportunity to mention either in the assumptions or these external factors part of a logic model where Colleen might be able to acknowledge that there may be other things coming into play? For example, if they're trying to do an educational workshop at the busiest part of the season, but it's the only time that it's possible for the timing of the grant, or if there's something where they acknowledge that this certain aspect may be challenging, but they have some sort of plan to overcome that.
Yeah, that would be great if you've thought through it completely and you maybe already know that in advance. But again, some things happen that you just don't know about. Like, for example, if you have a location that you plan to start, I don't know, start a new market at, and then something falls through that the land is no longer available, the city's going to use it for something else. Some things you just will not know until it happens. But if there are things that you do know beforehand, you could put that as a potential external factor. There's a possibility that none of my farmers are going to tweet. So that's the kind of thing. If you already know that, then it's good to do that. And here's my plan if that happens. So yeah, I would hope that either would, you'd list those things that you know up front, and then those that you don't, you don't have any control over. That's for sure.
Great. And then Colleen then had a follow-up question. For performance measures, do you want to see the goals, like what % change in the number of customers you hope for, or just that you will measure that change and report it? So I guess that's a question about baseline.
Right. Well, it would be nice if you gave yourself a goal, because it's I think we work a little harder if we have a goal in mind, if we're trying to reach a number. So, I would strive for something. I just wouldn't leave it open-ended, because remember, this is a very competitive grant program. We had close to 400 applications. We were able to award 149, but that still means a whole lot of applications just didn't make the cut. So if someone actually put something there and you didn't, and you could have, then you'll be upset later. So you want to be as as detailed as you possibly can, knowing that it's a competitive program and you're going to be competing with other maybe similar farmers markets or similar nonprofit sizes, or or similar local governments, or it's a competitive process. So you need to be as detailed and try to think of every opportunity to make your application shine.
Okay, and then the next question is regarding, I think, some of the priority areas that we've seen for Fmpp in past years and this year. That comes from Lynn. If a farmer's market is adjacent to a USDA designated food desert and customers from the food desert shop at that farmer's market, would this qualify for the additional 5 points in the grant?
I'm glad you mentioned this because we get this a lot. It has to, honestly, it just has to be in that location, and that address must be in a food desert. It's just the way it is. Even though you're beside or a mile down the road, doesn't count. It has to be in that food desert community. So yeah, it has to be implemented at that address in a food desert community.
Well, what if there were, let's say, outreach activities that happened in that community as a way to make them aware of that market? So the actual activities, maybe a workshop or a demonstration or certain marketing that was happening in that zip code.
So yeah, you definitely want to do that in that area. But just keep in mind, it's not in addition to. It can be in it can be in an area or a county with a poverty rate. So if it's in that same county, you can use the poverty rate as well. So remember, if it's not in a food desert, it can still be in a low-income area. So there's a way to search by the to get your poverty rate as well. And that has to be at least 20% or more.
Okay. And where do you recommend that they find that information? Would that be the Food Environment Atlas or the Census.gov website?
Sure. In our Fmpp guidelines, I can tell you it's on page 9. If you have the address of the location that you are trying to determine is or is not a food desert, then you can search by that address and put in that information and either get the FIPS code, which is what does FIPS stand for? I completely forgot now. I'm having a brain lapse. But anyway, you can get that track number. You can get the track number, or you can search the poverty rate for that address in that county and in your state and determine if that's if it fits that. And even if it doesn't, even if it doesn't meet that food desert priority, don't let that don't make that dissuade you from submitting an application, because we awarded lots of projects that were not in food deserts. So don't let that be the only thing that is going to prevent you from applying, because that's not the end all, in other words.
Just to clarify for Lynn, the definition for high poverty again is 20% or higher?
Yep, it's at least 20% or higher.
Great.
And we give you the website and how to do that search. Is all in our guidelines document.
Okay, here's another question to further complicate the issue.
That's okay.
This is from Sherry. She asked about, or she says that her overall community is at a 16% poverty rate, but the children in the community are at a 25% poverty rate. If our project focuses on the community residents under the age of 17, would the project qualify under that Fmpp priority for high
Right. Well, what we've asked this year, because we have seen that poverty rates differ in the children's category, as well as I think we call it all people poverty rate. So if it is not a activity that is for children, in other words, then you're to use the all people in poverty rate designation. If you are going to do something for children, I don't know, 16 or so or under, then you can use the children's rate. If that is the way that the children is defined under the ERS designation. If it's not, again, don't let that dissuade you from submitting an application, because again, we award both food desert as well as non-food desert projects.
Sorry for the pause. I'm trying to answer.
That's okay. No problem.
Writing as well. So let's see. Okay, here's another very similar question. According to the Census Department, our city is above the required poverty level, but the county, which is the link provided by Fmpp, is not. Can we use the city-based census information?
We have a, I think it's at the top, it says low access communities. And so if you have some information about that, then you can submit that as well. But you're supposed to have both. It's supposed to be both a low income community and a low access community. So again, don't let this dissuade you from submitting an application if you have just one. In other words, in our guidelines, we say that it must be a low-income community as well as qualify as a low-access community. So don't let being one over the other dissuade you from submitting an application. By all means, submit that application.
So to clarify, the low-income would be combined with low access, or they can be seen independently, but in order to qualify for the extra points in the proposal, it would need to be both?
Yes.
Okay.
And most of the time they are. So, but if you happen to be in a location where it's one over the other, don't let that, by all means, don't let that prevent you from submitting an application.
Okay, great. Now, Nicole has a question about the infamous Grants.gov and CCR.
Okay.
We have no subawardee. If we have no subawardee, I'm not quite sure I understand Nicole's question. Maybe she could
go ahead and read it, and I think I know where she's going.
If we have no subawardee is a CCR and DUNS number. Oh, there's just a comma I need to put in there mentally. If we have no subawardee, is a CCR and DUNS number required for a farmer's market application?
Okay. So let me answer this two ways, because I think I know what she's saying. She's saying if she does not have a subawardee that she's going to award money under Fmpp, does she still have to have a CCR and a DUNS number? Is that, if that's, can she quickly email, send the chat if that's am I answering it correctly? If she doesn't have any subawardees, does she, the organization applying, still have to have a CCR registration and DUNS number? Hopefully
Nicole,
she will do that.
Nicole, if you're still there, I've unmuted you. So if you want to just clarify that really quick. Did you hear Carmen's?
So are you asking me, Nicole, that if you are not awarding or you're not contracting or subawarding anyone, do you still have to have, you as in the organization applying, still have to have a DUNS number or CCR? Was that the question?
I think that's the way that I've interpreted it.
That's the way it sounds. Let me answer that way, and then I'll try to figure out if there was another way.
I just unmuted myself. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, you're correct. That's exactly what I was asking.
Okay. So yes, the organization still must have a CCR and a DUNS number just to apply. Well, you have to have that even before you can register with Grants.gov. So you must do that just to register to get into Grants.gov. So the question is, the answer to your question is yes, the organization must have a CCR and a DUNS number just to get into Grants.gov, even if they're not going to have a contractor or a sub-awardee.
Thank you, and thank you, Nicole, for making sure we were on the right track there, interpreting that. Carol has a question, that is, are the grants available for 2012 or for 2013?
Gotcha.
Can we start gathering data in 2012?
Okay. So grants, I know it sounds a little weird, but the way our our grant application process works, we start early, which is, January, February, March, announcing the grants. Monies will be available October of 2013. Does that answer the question? I think it does. And then then the grants, of course, are available for up to 2 years. So from 12 to 14, 12, 13, and 14, up to 2014. So October 12 through October 14, you can implement your grant.
I hope that's what Carol was asking, if she meant whether she could start gathering data now in 2012 with the assumption that the opportunity to apply will come around again this time next year.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a different question.
If that is her question, then
that's a different question. Because the answer to that question is we don't know if we will have funding in 2013.
And Carmen can plug her ears if she'd like, but whether that happens is in part up to all of us on this call, because the Senate is actually making some decisions about what the Farm Bill is going to include right now. And so if we want the Fmpp to continue, they definitely need to hear from stakeholders who care about the program that it's meaningful. So we won't know. We may not know until maybe January if there's going to be a round of funding in 2013 and then in subsequent years funded through the Farm Bill.
Yeah, we hope we'll know before January, but because our fiscal year starts October 1, so we hope we will have a 2013 program, but we may not know that soon. We're just not sure.
Great. Okay, now Kathy, it looks like she's left, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, just because it may be relevant. And maybe this is already answered with previous food desert related questions. Does your entire project need to be in a food desert to be given the priority status? For example, if the project is statewide and some areas are food deserts and others are not, how would it qualify?
If any of the project is in a food, it's a all or nothing for the 5 points. So everyone gets 1 point. So you either get the 1 point just because we don't give zeros in the scoring evaluation criteria, or you get 5 points. So there's not a in between. So you either get the 5 points or you don't.
So in that case, let's say about half of the markets that a statewide project was working with would be considered in food deserts.
Right.
Would
now, right.
5 points or 1?
Yeah, you would get the 5 points. Now, what we as an agency can decide is whether or not we want to actually fund the rest of your project. We may want you only to do the food desert portion.
Okay.
So that's why it's real important when you're working on what we've talked about here, your activities. One of your activities may be in a food desert community. You want to make sure that that activity can stand on its own, and your budget is enough to cover that aspect, because you don't want to say, well, that was part of the personnel portion was shown in activity 1A, but the food desert activity was activity C. No, you need to make sure you got personnel in A, B, and C, or just A and C, or whatever the case may be. You need to make sure that activity stands on its own.
Great. Okay, Charles is asking if there's a link to the University of Wisconsin work that we mentioned in the beginning, and that comes from Charles, and yes, that should be on the link. Let's see. That should be on this page. Those that one in the center there, the evaluation logic model templates, should be accessible from that website as well. And I think there's a wealth of other information on that website that's available there. So Lynn in Pennsylvania has another question. Which items are outside of the 12-page limit other than the logic model and the timeline? Are there other documents that are outside that 12-page limit?
Okay. Good question. And I have, I'm going to use my cheat sheet because I have that answer. And give me just a second, and I'll pull that up for you. Stacy, you may want to. Well, let me see here. Let me see if I can find it. And then if you can let me, if you can maybe switch to me and give me just a second, and then you can.
Okay, let me go to the next question.
Okay,
here
and I'll pull this up. I'll pull this up, and then I'll show everybody where where my cheat sheet is on the website.
Great. All right, Liz has made you the presenter, so you should be able to bring up what you need. And in the meantime,
okay. I got it. I'm sorry.
Oh, you got it.
I got it. Okay, so I am on. I'm on what's called frequently asked questions, and let's see. Let me move this out of the way so I can see. I'm between pages 6 and 7, and it says here, what part of my application counts towards the 12-page limit? And so here we go, right here, the title, the primary project manager information, the requesting funding, EBT checkboxes, eligibility statement, summary, goals and objectives, background, work plans, and you see expected outcomes and excludes the priority. Okay, so what you don't see is the logic model is on here. And what you don't see is questions 16 and 17, which are on the TM 29 that we are asking you to use. Those do not count. So give me 1 second. If you're still looking at the screen, I'm going to, how do I go back here? Hang on. I thought I could go back. I'm going to show you where this is. Okay, here it is. This is the main website that I'm showing you. And on the frequently requested information, it's called frequently asked questions. And once you pull that up, it's a PDF file, which is, crap, hang on 1 second. Where are you? There we go. It's frequently asked questions that are available for 2012. And that's where you get to that link. So everybody see that? So I think we were on pages 6 and 7. Talks about grants.gov. Goes through a lot of, this is a really fun thing to do because we try to include as many things we think you may ask about, so, and just stick it in here, you know, what counts toward the 12-page limit, what doesn't count, the documents and pages and things, that the links and things we think you are going to need and use. So that's here. Okay. So unless somebody just wants me to hold that open, Stacy, then you can go back to where you were.
Well, we can leave it there for now.
Okay.
We have a few other questions. I think some of these have been answered. Here again, I think this also was answered, but I'll just say it again. Megan and Drew also had a similar question. For low-income community qualification, what if 3 to 4 markets are partnering for the grant? Some are located in low-income communities and some are not. Does this qualify? How do we note this?
You would just say that your project, well, you have to list your addresses anyway, and if there's a FIPS number or if there's a poverty rate, you have to list that. You have to list it in the executive summary. So you would say you're implementing your projects in 1, 2, and 3, for example. 1 and 2 have maybe are food desert designations, and the third one is not. That's just, you know, you just list the 3 addresses and the 3 locations, and you'd say right beside it whether it was a food desert or not.
And can you clarify FIPS again?
Okay, let me, sure. Okay, for some reason I'm having a hard time remember what that is. But it is, my mind is just gone. I'm sorry. Maybe it's the pressure of the webinar. But it's a tracking code. It's the track number that is used by the food, the ERS for food desert information on the food desert locator site.
Great, and I did just send a link out in response to one of the questions to that, the food desert locator.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully folks had that. And the other one is, do you recommend we write our grant for as many projects as we see being able to implement, or are we more likely to receive funding if we request a modest amount? And that question comes from Audrey.
So I think this is regarding the budget requests or types of project requests. Am I hearing both, or in other words, for as many projects or in your budgets? I guess I need clarification.
It sounds like that this is a familiar scenario that anyone who's ever written a grant has come across. Is maybe what Audrey's saying is there's a lot of things that we want to do. Should we try to put them all in this one proposal as long as we feel that it can be carried out, or because that will assign it a higher price tag, is it more likely that we would get funded if the funding request and therefore the activities are much smaller in scale?
Oh, I see. Okay, that's a tough decision to give you guidance on, because well, first of all, there's a maximum, so that sort of gives you a clue about, you know, how much you can put in an application. $100,000 doesn't go as far as you would hope that it would. But if you can do several small projects with that, it's just really, I'd put the most needed thing. I would apply for the most needed activity, and then if there are other activities that would allow you to still, you know, use the monies that most needed project. If you have remaining funds for that, then put maybe something smaller to take that. But no, I wouldn't. It'd be hard for me to tell you, no, just do one big one or do 3 small ones. I would say I'd apply for what the most important or the most needed thing is. I think only because you'd hate to not get what you really need at first. So I'd always put that number one thing first and then go from there about whatever's left over.
Now, how frequently do reviewers identify one aspect of a project that sounds very promising and say, well, this other stuff sounds like they didn't budget for it very well, or it's
it happens
rather than just saying throwing the whole thing out altogether.
Right. No, that happens all the time, and it will probably happen more because reviewers are going to have a lot more input on budgets, so they're going to be providing us guidance on whether or not only is your budget realistic, but whether the things that you're asking for, they're going to play a heavier role in looking at what you're asking for and matching it up to whether or not it corresponds with your narrative and your goals and objectives, and providing more recommendations to us about the budget in general. Before, we had done that mostly ourselves internally, and that with the number of awardees growing, we're going to have to depend on our peer reviewers to provide additional guidance. So they're going to be heavily involved in reviewing your budgets. So know that your peers are looking at what you're asking for. They know whether or not a clipboard is $3 or $10. So they will be heavily involved in that process this year. So I think again, I would stick with what's most needed, and I would make your budget realistic, not too overly inflated, because your peers will definitely know that it is.
Oh, we have a clarification question, I think, that comes from Sherry, and it regards to the collection of baseline data that we were trying to interpret her question. I think she meant, can your plan be, can you develop a proposal for this round, and your plan be to gather baseline data after May 21st? So maybe you don't have baseline data when you're applying for the grant.
I see.
But that will be your first activity upon getting it, so that you have it prior to the beginning of the grant period.
Okay. Yes, you can do that, but again, just keep in mind that you're competing against people who may have already done that and may have sort of that under their belt. So, but yes, you can do that.
Well, I'm sorry, I was on mute. The other question is if grants would be funded in October 2012 and could run as long as September 2014 if they were a 2-year proposal, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So yeah, when you submit an application, you would say that you're going to start your project on October 1, 2012.
Great. And the longest it could go would be September for 2012.
30th, yeah, I always say October, but yeah, September 30th. It would be to 24.
Great.
24 months.
Okay, and one question that we have, again from Colleen, is does FMPP or FMC keep a list of possible vendors who can be grant partners? So if a market wants to do a certain activity and needs to get costs from a provider who could deliver the activity, do you have that kind of resource available? That's a great question. I know that FMC does not presently, although if a member were to come to us and say we want to do promotional printing, are you aware of any companies that you've seen do a good job with things like that, or pop-up tents or things like that? We could, to the best of our ability, try to respond to some of those things. And certainly the FMC listserv is a good resource for crowdsourcing that kind of information. But does FMPP have any sense of who those kind of?
No, we do not keep a list of partners that might be able to assist. Only because we're a staff of 6 and we're busy trying to get the program implemented and ready and pay all the awardees. So that there's we do what we can, but we don't have everything available to the applicant, and we do not have that type of information.
Colleen, I think that's a great question. It reminded me also that although we don't have anything formal at this point set up, but we're working on it, if there's a need, for example, not just a product, but a kind of, sort of as you indicated, a partner, like someone who may be able to provide expertise on a certain topic or a certain aspect of your project, or give you advice or counsel on certain strategies or survey techniques or things like that that might be specific to your project, that might also be something that we could help with. And in some cases, we might be aware of someone who can provide a specific skill. If you're very specific with your request about what you need, we may be able to identify someone who could play that role as a partner. And I think that the last couple questions, Ryan had a question about ORCA, the Online Representations and Certifications application, and I believe that's part of the Grants.gov process. Is that correct, Carmen?
You know what? I'm not sure. Repeat that again. I'm not familiar with that.
ORCA, the Online Representations and Certifications application.
ORCA.
Ryan, if you're still on, I'm going to try to unmute you, and maybe you can clarify that. Ryan, are you there? While you're looking that up, I am going to ask another question. We just keep getting these. And people, I understand, we've been on for a while, so if you need to drop off, go ahead and do so. But those of you who are still interested, hang on, and we'll try to get all these questions answered. Can an organization receive an Fmpp grant as the main recipient and also act as a subcontractor under a different AMS grant? And I assume they mean a different Fmpp grant, but maybe there is a different. There aren't that many.
Okay, repeat that one more time. Can they receive a grant and also be a sub-awardee, you mean, under another grant?
So they'd be like a partner on another proposal.
Oh, yeah, yes. They
and
cannot
also be a lead applicant on their own proposal.
Right. So, yeah, so they, in other words, if Stacy and I were working together and Stacy was awarded the grant, can I be another can I be a sub-awardee under her grant and then an applicant under and an awardee under another grant? Is that correct?
That's how I understand the question, yes.
Yes. So in other words, we can't give Stacy more than one grant, and we can't give Carmen more than one grant, but if Carmen submits an application and she's working with another organization, yes, that can happen. The thing that we like to tell folks when they're going to work with someone else, just to remember to get your ducks in a row or whatever paperwork is needed, so that Carmen doesn't have a memory loss when she's awarded and forgets to give Stacy what she said she was going to give her. So we've just warned folks to just make sure you, when you're working with other organizations, that you have some legal or whatever measures you need to have in place so that people don't have a lapse of memory later.
There is one question, and I believe I may have answered it in a previous one. Are poverty rates county-wide? My understanding is that the poverty rates are listed both at the county level and at the city level if you're searching in grants.gov. I know I was looking in there not too long ago, and I could search either by county or by city once I went to a certain state. I could look up there.
And are we talking about the ERS?
She's talking about poverty rates, not food desert.
Right, but I think that food desert, I think they, if I'm not mistaken, I think they created both of those. I think they created both of those databases. I think ERS did both of those, but I think we use the one that is by county. You go to your state first, and then you go to your county.
Okay. And then, did we find anything else out about the ORCA?
Yeah, and if that's the grants.gov online information, I'm not as I think we provided links in the guidelines to it. I'm just not as familiar about their acronyms. That's all. And I apologize for not knowing those.
Mm-hmm. And that, so as you mentioned in your presentation, that grants.gov requirement is something that is new this year. And
right.
I know that you and your staff held back on doing that for a long time because you really wanted to make this accessible in terms of people being able to submit paper applications, and this year finally had to make that leap.
Right, that's true. But what we also provided too is on our website. I've got another. I've got a link. I'm sorry. Yeah, a link from the main web page. A lot of detailed information about submitting in grants.gov. So I don't know, Stacy, if you can cross over to me again one more time. I'll show folks where that is,
It's still your screen. We see your website.
Oh, good. Okay. So it's the how to submit via grants.gov. It's a PDF file. So if you'll print that, if you've never done it before, you need to sort of go through this and follow the steps, because it does take a little while to get that done. But I think it's maybe 3 pages, but that'll help anyone who's doing this for the very first time. It's got a tutorial from via grants.gov. It's got the checklist for what you need to register before you even get started. It gives some information about just how to download things, what we're going to be looking for, how to save things and things like that. So by all means, use that tool as well. It's how to submit an Fmpp application via grants.gov.
Great. And for any technical questions regarding grants.gov, of course, those would go not to your staff, but to grants.gov.
Correct. Yeah. Let me see if that's not on here. What I promised to do, since I don't see that on here, this actually got completed when I was away. I will make sure that the phone number and everything is added as the last, the phone number, the hours, and the website and email and things like that is added to this last page. I'll get that done today, and we'll post this back on the website. If not today, it'll be first thing in the morning, but I'll make sure that that is included as the last information of a point of contact for grants.gov.
Great. And one other clarification to a previous question from Megan, and I think we're done with the questions here. And that is just to clarify that the other grant would be Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. And my understanding is that because that is an entirely different program, and because those Specialty Crop Block Grant applications, unless Megan is from the state agency, would go through the state agency, so Fmpp reviewers would not even know necessarily who was being funded under Specialty Crop Block Grant.
No, but we do share information before things are awarded. So I think there's a spot on our application, and I think there's a spot on TRISTA's Specialty Crop Program where you list pending grants as well as those grants that you received. So you would need to list it in our application. It's existing and pending support. Those would be those grant programs that you're waiting to hear from. You would list that under ours. I think Specialty Crops are about to close, so you would, if you have submitted something and that your state is waiting to hear back from, that you could list that under existing and pending support, and even though it's through a State Department of Agriculture. And I think Trista has a place on her application to do that as well. Most of the federal grantors have that, require that information. So it's okay that you're waiting to hear back from them as well. Just list that you're waiting to hear back from them, and that's fine. You've done what you are required to do under our grant program.
Great. And I think that covers all of the questions we have. I can't believe we've been on here for an hour and 45 minutes. Time flies. Thank you again, Carmen, for doing this. Do you have any last comments or words of wisdom to share?
Okay. Well, no, I would just say if you're unsure about something, make sure you call or email us and ask a question before you submit something and you're unsure whether or not it was appropriate. We're happy to help you. And also, many thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'm glad. I feel good about being able to walk you through this and also walk you through the other details about the application process. And I want to definitely thank Stacy and Liz for allowing me to participate in this. And I appreciate all your help and all the